All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Mr. Parrish.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Item number 1 is comments by the general public.
Thank you. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on today's agenda. Those wishing to speak on the posted agenda item, now is your opportunity. Please step forward to the microphone and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the first public comment period.
Item 2 is action to approve the agenda with the deletion of any items. Mr. Chair, the agenda is in order for approval.
All right, there's a motion to approve the agenda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? And do we have Councilman Wanless on the phone? I know he was going to call in.
Not yet. 8:40
Okay.
he's going to call in.
Okay, got it.
So motion carries.
Yep, motion carries.
Item 3 is action to approve the minutes of the August 10, 2023 meeting. Mr. Chair, the minutes are in order for approval.
All right, there's a motion to approve the minutes of the August 10th, 2023 meeting. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item number 4 is to discuss the general manager's monthly report. Mr. Chair, we had quite a bit of rain since the last board meeting, so I put together kind of a lengthy, and I apologize in advance, PowerPoint to go through. It's going to have a lot of numbers and tables and charts and stuff in it, but I'll try to explain everything and see if you have any questions. If I'm going to try to go through it kind of quick, so if you have any questions or I need to slow down, just let me know. But we did have quite a bit of rain since the last board meeting, starting with the Hurricane Hilary. Just a little timeline for you. On Tuesday, August 15th, the National Weather Service first identified it as a tropical cyclone in the Pacific Ocean south of Mexico. The predicted path you can see there was to go up and turn northerly towards the Baja Peninsula and Southern California. And so there was a concern about that moisture traveling up the Colorado River Valley. And if you talk to our senior hydrologist, who's here in the audience, the worst event we can experience in terms of rainfall, in his view, is if we have a hurricane that impacts the Colorado River Valley and pushes moisture up that valley to Clark County. That's where we would get our moisture that would cause and trigger thunderstorms. So we were quite concerned about this storm event. It was forecast to land as a tropical storm, so it did reach hurricane strength out in the ocean, but by the time it got to the landfall, it was downgraded to a tropical storm, but still a dangerous storm. And the National Weather Service was predicting flash flooding in California and Nevada. They started on the 16th, Wednesday the 16th, doing webinars for stakeholders and filling us in on what they expected this storm would do to Clark County. Because of the early warning, the emergency management teams were mobilized, as well as public works staff. That worked very well. It was all virtual, which is good as long as there's power and internet, but we had both of those things, so it was working pretty well. It was kind of an all hands on deck. The public works staff were calling in their staff to be ready to go if something were to happen. They actually positioned equipment in different parts of the county so they could have a rapid response should there be an issue. And then the outreach, particularly to the homeless, was ramped up. The social services for Clark County and the cities, as well as the Help of Southern Nevada and the charities, the nonprofits, Shine a Light also went out, and they were interacting with the homeless in the system and telling them to get their stuff out and get prepared for this storm. And that seemed to work pretty well during the hurricane. They kind of listened to that message and seemed to get out of harm's way initially. So on Friday, August 18th, we kind of had a little precursor to the landfall. We saw some moisture push up into Clark County. Dew points rose above 50 degrees, which is when we start getting nervous about thunderstorms. If we see dew point temperatures rise above a 50-degree level. That did trigger some widespread thunderstorms throughout Clark County, kind of a precursor. We had moderate rainfall throughout the county, but kind of most of the intensity was in the southwest portion. And so just a couple of highlights. The rainfall at the Desert Tortoise Center southwest of Las Vegas was about an inch. And then there were a couple of gauges, 0.8 of an inch on Duck Creek, near Silverado Ranch. That's by the South Point, and then another 0.87 registered at the gauge at the Lower Duck Creek Detention Basin near Bermuda and Serene. So not small amounts of flow, but just kind of a precursor of what could happen. We didn't have any issues related to this first rainfall event in terms of damages or anything like that. Moving on into, actually Saturday was pretty calm. There was actually some blue skies and there wasn't much going on Saturday. Moving into Sunday, we still anticipated the landfall, and it did, as forecast. The storm did decrease in intensity to a tropical storm. You can kind of see what the prediction was in terms of moisture moving into the western part of the United States there. Again, on Sunday during the day, we had some widespread storm activity, rainfall amounts in 1/4 to 3/4 of an inch, which is not small, but it was pretty typical for something like that. And the system had no trouble handling any of that water. Moving into Sunday night, though, with the orographic lift due to the high terrain of Mount Charleston, we did see excessive rainfall amounts on the mountain Sunday night. We saw just that night a couple of inches, but overall, a 24-hour period, we had almost 6 inches of rain on Mount Charleston, which is pretty impressive for them. So just looking through some of the gauge data, 5.67 inches at one of the highest gauges we have is at Rainbow Canyon, and near the peak, well, it's not the peak, but up near Old Town in Mount Charleston. 5.07 inches at Harris Springs just downstream. Another gauge recorded 3.62 inches. Again, this is 24-hour rainfall totals for that night. And then we did have some rain closer to the city, particularly in the southwest part of the valley. The Red Rock Visitor Center saw 2 inches of rain, which all that water drains into the Red Rock Detention Basin. I'll show you a couple of photos of that here in a second. So again, saw quite a bit of rainfall up on the mountain, and as you might expect, some damages did occur up there. So we had our engineers take a look at the storm at that Rainbow Canyon gauge up on the mountain to see how this rated as part of, whether it was a 100-year event or not. What this graph is showing you is cumulative depth of rainfall versus time. And so you can see where it gets steeper there. That means we're getting more rainfall in a shorter amount of time, higher intensity there. So we did analyze that. It actually, for a 6-hour period, we had about 3 inches of rain. You can see in the table down there. That's about a 40-year event up on the mountain. So, but for the 24-hour period, that 5.67 inches, that's roughly a 100-year rainfall intensity. And based on the volumes of runoff we saw up on the mountain, we're pretty confident that could be considered a 100-year, 24-hour event. For a 6-hour storm, just so for your information, when we did our hydrology up there as part of our master plan, Rainbow Canyon has about 5,000 CFS flowing through it during a 100-year event, which is about the same flow you would see at Flamingo Wash at Eastern. So if that kind of gives you an idea how much water we're talking about here. So significant damages up on the mountain. All 3 of the highways up there, 156, 157, and 158 were damaged. One substantially damaged, 158, I think in the connector between 156 and 157 was heavily damaged. The lower left photo there is Echo Canyon Road. That's actually a roadway, and you can see all the debris that wound up. It acted like a river essentially, and all the debris wound up after the storm event on that road. That power was affected, water was affected, water lines were washed out. The emergency operations team reported that 1 structure was destroyed up on Mount Charleston, 2 structures suffered major damage, and 12 structures had minor damage. And then, as I mentioned, highways, private roads, and public roads had segments that were washed out. I want to give some kudos here to the teams that responded. In particular, in Clark County, the emergency operations team, the staff under Chief John Steinbeck, Billy Samuels was the emergency operation manager for this event, and Chief Gonzalez is the chief up on Mount Charleston. Just did a really great job. The emergency operations team were already stood up because of the hurricane, and so I think that helped get resources up here a lot quicker. But the public works maintenance staff was just amazing. They got equipment up there very fast. They cleared the roads. You can see the lower left picture is the same road that had all the debris on it the day before. So in one day, they had that road cleared out. That was allowing the utility companies to get up there and do their work and start working on the power and the water very quickly. Public information at the county did a great job as well, coordinating with the residents up there, explaining what's happening, how they can get services. They set up emergency services at the hotel for people that didn't have water, so they could take showers and get water and that type of thing. So a lot of work happened in a very short amount of time. Also, a good shout out to the National Weather Service for all the predictions. And in reality, what they predicted over that storm event was pretty much what happened. The amount of rainfall was almost identical to what they had predicted. NDOT got right on the highways that were damaged. They put temporary bypasses around the damaged areas so that equipment could get up to the mountain and that recovery work could start. And then all the utilities, SNWA, Las Vegas Valley Water, NV Energy, all jumped on it really quick and started working as fast as they could. And then we had national partners up there as well, National Forest Service, the Corps has been up there, FEMA is working up there as well as the National Guard. So National Guard provided some equipment for some rescues, and there were some areas that were hard to get to because of the washed out roads, and they were able to get some equipment up there to help the residents. So I think all in all, the response was pretty amazing in my view. Although Mount Charleston was the main focus of this storm, I did mention that there was quite a bit of rainfall at the Red Rock Visitor Center. That water runs into the Red Rock Detention Basin. The upper right picture is the inflow structure there into the detention basin. And then the lower left is the water that was being held by that detention basin. It's right upstream of the Red Rock Country Club and other parts of Summerlin. The lower right is the Flamingo and Las Vegas Wash confluence on the golf course at Club at Sunrise. It's working as it was designed. So that was a good picture to see. I will say that the outreach to the community in terms of the unhoused population worked very well prior to the hurricane. The message was heeded and it seemed like people got out of the system. But when it cleared up right after, they just moved right back in. And so we had a secondary storm after the fact that was triggered by moisture that was still in the air. That resulted in two individuals that we believed were unhoused that got caught up in that flow. One was found deceased. The other one was not located, and so we're not sure if that person was able to get out on their own or if they were rescued or not. We just don't know what happened to that person. The cause and manner of that first death is still being determined, whether or not it was. Sometimes the unhoused population die for reasons other than flooding, but they're still in the channel. And so we have to wait for the coroner's report to make sure that it was actually a flood-related death before we'll report on that. So not to be outdone by a hurricane, the monsoon season came along the next week and produced quite a bit of moisture in our area. We had two clusters of storms form on September 1. The first kind of went from the southwest to the northeast through the valley. The second cluster kind of formed on the west end of the valley and moved east. There's a couple of things that worry us when something like that happens. The first is they're kind of back-to-back storms, right? So the first storm came through, and so our facilities had water in them from the first storm. And that takes up volume. So then if we have a second storm, we have less volume to control that runoff from the second storm. The second thing is the second storm moved from west to east, which is the direction of the runoff. And so when you have rainfall on top of the runoff as it's flowing through the city, that can exacerbate runoff through the channels. The third thing is something we call antecedent moisture, which is the ability of soil to absorb water. And it can only handle so much water at a time, and it gets saturated, and then it won't handle any more water. And so if you have an earlier storm that saturates the soil and then another storm comes along, that water can infiltrate, and that can increase runoff as well. So all those things were working against us, and we were quite worried about how the system would react to that. Significant rainfall, but these rainfall totals, you can see it's a 34-hour rainfall total we put on this, but this is spread out over a couple of days, this rainfall. So the intensity level was not very high, but it was a lot of rain, a lot of volume of rain was falling over the weekend. So you can see there's kind of a cluster of gauges there that all registered over 2 inches. That's right around Rhodes Ranch in the southwest part of Las Vegas. We had a gauge at, again, the Red Rock Canyon Visitor Center has been very active. It got almost 2.5 inches at that during this time period at that gauge. And then up on the Mount Charleston, we had rain again, and so we were worried about the recovery effort up on Mount Charleston. There was a lot of equipment and people working up there, and then we were getting more rain, so there was a lot of concern by the emergency management staff up there to make sure the workers stay safe while they're doing their work up there. So the Weather Service was doing specific weather reports just for the mountain for the emergency management team up there to let them know what to expect when rain was coming. And then the east side of Las Vegas had quite a bit of rain as well. The Frenchman Mountains, Sunrise Mountain area on the east side of Las Vegas received significant rainfall totals. There was a 2-day rainfall total. This is a 48-hour rainfall total of almost 4 inches at Flamingo Wash where it crosses Nellis. That's right upstream of Club of Sunrise Golf Course. 3 inches on Las Vegas Wash at Nellis, just to the north of that. We had another gauge up in North Las Vegas where Las Vegas Wash crosses Main Street at 3.15 inches. And then up in Nellis Air Force Base, 2.36 inches of rain fell there. So again, lots of rainfall, not as intense, but a large volume of rain nonetheless.
Excuse me, do you not have any gauges there, right, where, say, Bonanza and Hollywood or the Sunrise Mountain? They had a lot of flooding there, I know.
They did. I mean, the gauges that you see there are where we have them located. We don't have any gauges right in that area, but we do know the storms went right across that, and you can kind of see from the gauges surrounding that area that Frenchman and Sunrise Mountain got a significant amount of rain, and there was a lot of damage up there. And we'll talk about that in a minute. So in terms of our facilities, again, they performed admirably. The detention basins, I'll talk about in a minute, they caught a lot of water, detained that water, and controlled it. So where we had facilities, the test, we passed that test. I think those facilities worked very well. We had very minimal damage in areas where facilities existed. The upper right is the Rainbow Gardens Weir and Las Vegas Wash. That drains into Lake Las Vegas, which you probably saw photos of the debris that washed into the lake that had to be cleaned up. Lots of mostly wooded, tree trunks and stuff like that were flowing into the lake. And then the lower left is the Tropicana South Bay. This detention basin is designed with 2 bays. There's a North Bay and a South Bay. The North Bay tends to fill up first, and then it spills over into the South Bay. So if we see water in the South Bay, that means we're getting a lot of water because the North Bay, we know, had filled in, and the South Bay was rising. And this basin in particular was causing us some concern. It was, is rising in level pretty rapidly. We knew it was still raining upstream. We knew we were looking at the gauges of all the channels and things upstream of this basin that were still flowing. And so we expected quite a bit more water in here. It still had a lot of capacity, but we did raise the awareness of Public Works and the emergency management team of this basin, just to keep an eye on it to make sure if it was going to have an overtopping event, we wanted everybody to be aware of it early. So it turned out that the storm kind of petered out upstream of there, and so it was able to handle the flow without any trouble. But again, we kind of raised the alarm a little bit there to make sure everyone was on track with that. Our system, our flood threat recognition system, the Gauge network, is set up to notify staff when an alarm is triggered. And an alarm is triggered when we get an excessive amount of rain over a short amount of time, or if we get a water level rise in a basin or a channel in a short amount of time, it sends us a notification, an alarm. Over that weekend, we had 642 alarms sent in 2 days. So that's the most ever. It was kind of amazing. We'd open the gauges that you see on the map turn yellow or red if there's an alarm going off, and it looked like a Christmas tree. Alarms were going off everywhere, so it was pretty substantial storm. This is eye chart. You don't have to look at the numbers too much, but I'll highlight a few things on here. We had our staff take a look at just a smattering of our detention basins that were holding water. So for example, the Tropicana, the North Bay of the Tropicana detention basin, the water depth was 30 feet at the peak of that storm. The flow in to the detention basin was estimated, and granted, this is just an estimate. We don't have gauges of water going into our detention basins. So they were estimating what this is, but they came up with 5,700 cubic feet per second. So if you can think of a box that can hold a basketball, that's about a cubic foot. If you can imagine 5,700 of those boxes going by per second was what was draining into the Tropicana detention basin during the peak. What was draining out was 440 cubic feet per second. So it went from 5,700 coming in to 440 coming out. And that's a 92% reduction in peak flow because that detention basin was in place. So if you think about from the second column from the right, that estimated flow in, if there were no detention basins built as part of our system, all of that flow would have worked its way through the city and the damages would have been substantially increased. The other thing I'll point out is if you sum the total amount of storage in just these basins, it was about 2,700 acre feet, which is about 872 million gallons of water that was captured and detained by the system. So again, the facilities worked really well. We were very proud of them, and that they functioned just like they were designed. But if Mother Nature has this way of pointing out where we don't have facilities yet, and so in areas of town there are areas where facilities have not yet been built. We did have 3 deaths associated with this storm. The first was the young man that was inner tubing on Boulder Highway, I think, which is a bad decision, and he wound up getting, I think, pinned under a vehicle, and he lost his life. That is tragic for us. Any death is tragic, but when we have this message we send out, this flood safe message that we just reinforce over and over again, and it just takes one person not to heed that warning that these flood waters are dangerous and they can kill you very easily. 2 other deaths were suspected unhoused individuals. Again, cause are pending there. We're waiting on the coroner's report to see if they drowned or if they were killed some other way. We had lots of damage to homes with this storm. Homes and businesses in the Lake Mead, Mount Hood area were damaged. The photo to the right there, upper right, is actually a vehicle that wound up in a channel. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a second, but fortunately that car was empty. It was just parked on a roadway, and the water down that road was so high it picked that car up and carried it into the channel, but it blocked that culvert and caused the water to kick out of the channel there, and that caused some flooding of structures downstream. I think the flooding would have been a little less if that car didn't wind up in the channel, but we'll talk about that in just a second. The areas, again, west of Frenchman Mountain and Sunrise Mountain had a lot of damage. Tropicana Boulder Highway, there's a Circle K, that's the lower left picture, has a lot of drainage comes through there. That Circle K has flooded several times in the past, as well as Sportsman's Manor. You might have saw on the news, some apartments had problems there as well. And then the lower right is the downtown area. That's Carson and Spencer area, had some issues as well. We'll talk about what we're gonna do with all 3 of these areas in just a second. Lots of flooding in streets. I saw cars swamped at like Rancho near Powell Station and a few other places. Anytime we have a storm event with this much rain, we're going to have water in the streets, and there's going to be ponding in low areas and that type of thing. It's going to cause problems. And then, so corresponding to that, a lot of debris in the roadways, a lot of decorative rock washed out, a lot of just erosion of just natural erosion occurring and washing into the roadways. And then I-15 southbound at Primm had to be closed due to flooding for a while until the water receded. So I'm going to talk about each of those problem areas just real quick and let you know what happened and what we're proposing to do to try to solve those or reduce those issues. This is the Mount Hood, Lake Mead area. So there's a pretty big wash that runs on the south side of Lake Mead, right where the pointer is and where that arrow is. That water runs down into a little channelized area between 2 subdivisions. So you can kind of see it following down as you go west there. From there, it drains right into a roadway. It goes right into Piccadilly Road. There's no storm drain in Piccadilly. The water just surface drains right into the road, and that's where that car that I had shown you a picture of was picked up, that was parked on Piccadilly. The car was carried down into a channel. Actually, it mowed over some bollards that were there. Those were flattened, and it wound up into the channel right where that other arrow is. And that's kind of what caused a lot of the flooding on the west side of Hollywood there. There's a church that had a lot of problems with their landscaping, and a few apartments that were affected there. And then the water eventually works its way through those roadways back into Lake Mead, and that's what happened at Mount Hood. There were businesses there that are low, they're below the road, and anytime you have a structure below the roadway, if you get more water than the road can handle, that structure is going to have a problem. So that was the main issue here at Mount Hood and Lake Mead. You can kind of see the green channel there. There's a facility proposed to pick that water up, carry it north up into another system, and then eventually drain it into the Confluence Detention Basin. That is on our plan. It's not yet on the 10-year plan, but it is proposed. So eventually we'll be building a structure there to try to help with that issue. I'll also say there's a couple of gravel pits just to the, right there, that are active gravel pits. They're very deep. We're working with that gravel pit operator. They want to convert that into a detention basin. So that's something we're looking at. Those two pits held about 10 feet of water, and they're like 14 acres. So that's 140 acre feet that just drained in there and was held during the storm event. So we're kind of still figuring out what we're going to do there in terms of flood control, but there are facilities proposed that will help alleviate the issues that we saw in this storm. Along the Frenchman Mountain to the south, so Sunrise Mountain and Frenchman Mountain, there's a lot of development that occurred in the 80s, the 70s and 80s up there without any regard to flood control. This whole kind of area is like a nightmare for a flood control engineer, because things were built right in the bottom of washes. Walls were built across flow paths. Houses were built with no regard for drainage. Houses built below roads. I mean, it's kind of a mess. And so it's really hard from a flood control perspective to try to do something to help with that area. We do have some facilities though. We did have a report of some flooding north of Washington near Hollywood. The Jim McGoy Detention Basin is proposed there. It was just recently funded for construction, so it's going to be starting construction here in the next 5 or 6 months once it gets advertised.
And we did find Assemblyman McGoy, so we're ready
Thank
to
you,
go.
sir. You did call me, so
Yeah,
that was a success. I appreciate your help on that. You did. You did a great job there. Thank you. So that once that basin's in, the areas to the west of that will have much more protection, and should see quite an improvement in terms of drainage. To the south of that, the Orchards Levee is another facility. This has been a long time coming. I think I've told Commissioner Seegerbloom that in terms of permitting, this was the most difficult project in our history, I think, in getting an environmental permit to be able to build this thing. It literally took an act of Congress because there was a wilderness study area here that had to be lifted. That has since been done. We're in the final stages of design on that. We're acquiring some right-of-way for some private land at the north end of this, so it's getting very close. It should be ready to be funded here in the next few months, we believe. And again, that'll help a lot of the areas to the west of that. There's kind of a gap there in between those two facilities where water can still come down into those undeveloped areas, and there's just we're kind of at a loss at this point what to really do there. It's really not that much water compared to these other washes, but still a small amount of water when you don't plan for it or build for it can cause some problems. So we'll continue to look at that, but at this point, we're not really sure what exactly to do short of buying houses or trying to get some rights of way through there. The Tropicana Boulder Highway area, the Andover area, that arrow is pointing near it's off a little bit, but the Circle K, it's a little to the right, right there. The Circle K that was flooded is right there. We do have a facility proposed in Tropicana. Design money was just approved by this board last month to start that design. It'll start at Duck Creek on the east end, work its way up through the Wetlands Park, and then run up Tropicana to pick that water up at at Andover. And then eventually a phase 2 will extend that storm drain up to Mountain Vista. So that will take care of the issues there at Andover and that Circle K. It's important to point out that oftentimes I'll hear from the press and they'll say, there's a problem here, why don't you just build a storm drain? Well, a lot of times we don't have a way to drain a storm drain. You have to build from the downstream up. So it could be taking a while to get to a problem area, but that's because we're building miles and miles of facility to get to that problem area. It's something we just can't throw a storm drain anywhere, and it has to be able to drain. So we have to build things in a logical order. This is another good example of that. This is the downtown area. The Carson and Spencer area where we saw the photo is a little bit kind of south of that blue arrow. But there's a lateral that's under construction now, working its way up Maryland Parkway. They're about it, right about where that bend is there. Hasn't quite extended up far enough to catch the water that impacted Carson and Spencer, but that work is actively underway now. It should be done in the next 5 months or so, 5 or 6 months. It's just, again, the storm hit before the flood control facility could be in. But this is another good example of we had to start this facility at Boulder Highway and Flamingo Wash, work all the way up Boulder Highway, then all the way up Charleston to be able to try to get something up here to try to solve this problem. So it takes years to get, years worth of effort and a lot of money to get that system in. Okay, I'm almost done, so I'm talking a lot. So another thing I'm often asked is, if we had the July 8th storm, how would we have done? The July 8th, 1999 storm was a 100-year event. It had significant rainfall. I'll say that storm was more intense than what we saw on September 1 and September 2, but nonetheless, it had quite a bit of rain. So if you look at, this is the rainfall totals for that storm, the July 8th, 1999 storm. You can see on the west side of the valley, we had gauges with, over 3 inches of rain in it. Kind of down by the airport, we had a gauge that was 3.54. Good job, Andrew, found it. 3.54 inches. That was in July 8th, 1999. As you may recall from that storm, there was a lot of damage along Duck Creek, along Flamingo Wash. You might remember Miracle Mile Mobile Home Park with the trailers that were undermined along Flamingo Wash. All of that damage occurred with this storm event. If you compare these rainfall totals to what we saw September 1 and September 2, the totals are about the same. Again, less intense. It was spread out over a longer period of time, admittedly. But still, very high rainfall totals, kind of similar up in the Red Rock Canyon area, down through where the airport is, lots of rainfall. And I can say that the facilities that have been built in there work very well. We didn't really have any problems with the channels along Flamingo Wash or along Duck Creek, even though they were carrying quite a bit of water. And then the last 2 slides. This map shows existing facilities as they were in 1999. The blue is the channels that were built and the detention basins that were built in 1999. We had 250 miles of channels and storm drains and 48 detention basins in 1999. Since then, this is what it looks like today. So lots more channels, lots more storm drains. We're up to 684 miles of channels and storm drains and 106 detention basins, which is an increase of 424 miles of channels and 58 detention basins since 1999. So a lot of investment has been made in facilities, but I think we're seeing the benefit of those facilities by how well they worked during storms like the one we saw in September. That's it. Any questions or comments?
Questions, comments?
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a really good report, and of course, I think I had a couple of videos that I showed you of some of the washes on the east side. That I swear they look like they're about 75%. The washes filled, which I was actually kind of concerned, but I think overall this I would characterize our system as holding up pretty well. But I just think there was just so much water that it overwhelmed us in certain spots. Are we going to do some sort of like a post-mortem where we actually have a chance to go and make a list of the hot spot or wet spots across the valley that maybe they were kind of unforeseen, and I'm just thinking of a few, say, like Cheyenne and Las Vegas Boulevard, you know, they're in North Las Vegas there, kind of like with county there. It was kind of unforeseen. We had people kind of like having their cars kind of ruined there, right? No fatalities there, thankfully. But are we going to do a post-mortem kind of like hotspot thing? And the other thing that I was always worried, I'm worried about, because we see this in Florida a lot, sinkholes. I haven't seen sinkholes as far as I can remember here in Las Vegas Valley, but those scare us, you know. Or that scares me because, you know, I drive kind of a heavy vehicle there, a pickup truck, and I'm just thinking, gee, if there's any place here in the valley where the road's been undermined, it would be a really nasty surprise, maybe driving through and then having the asphalt give out underneath you. And I saw, I guess, somewhere, and I think it's in your district, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Where you have a
Jones.
really bad one.
It was Jones and
Yeah,
Gutters.
what are we doing to work with the municipalities and the county to maybe predict or address, you know, possible sinkholes?
Yeah, so in terms of looking after the fact, we certainly interact with all the public works agencies and identify areas where there are hot spots. Usually we know they're hot spots already, and it just happened to flood again. And there's usually things that are being proposed that will help resolve those issues. And so, yeah, we do definitely work with all the public works officials. The maintenance guys are the best source because they know right where to go. Puebla's up in North Las Vegas is another good example of a big pond, and we got facilities that are coming in to help with that area as well. So the answer to your question is yes, we work very closely and look at problem areas, and we're updating our master plan right now. And so if there are areas that have been identified that we don't have facilities, we're going to try to see if there's something we can do to help those areas. The sinkhole, I'm with you. That's the only time I can remember having a sinkhole in Clark County. I think that was maybe just a one-off. There must have been something happening under that road that we didn't know about and caused that problem. Again, we'll need to follow up with Public Works and see if they know what the issue was. A lot of times it's a utility or something gets put in and the compaction isn't great or something
Or
happens.
a leak, maybe.
Maybe a leak, yeah. And so we'll need to follow up and see what happens with that. A sinkhole is something you can't really predict, though. And so I know that all of the roads are built to standards, and those standards are designed such to make them stable even during storm events. So I don't know that that's going to be a huge problem, but it did catch our attention when it did happen.
Mr. Chairman, Steve,
Council.
the bulk of the damage that I saw was up on Mount Charleston. In our 10-year plan, do we have anything that's going to help mitigate the future problem up there?
Yeah, so we got the Jim McGoy Detention Basin, which is funded, and we'll start construction soon. That'll help quite a bit. The levee along Orchards that is nearing completion of design will be coming to this board for funding of that probably in the next 2 months. We're just acquiring the right-of-way, and once that's done, we'll be able to come in for funding on that one. The one up to the north, the Mount Hood issue, Lake Mead, that is on the plan, but it's not programmed yet. So we'll have to work with North Las Vegas. It's actually programmed in North Las Vegas, but the county will probably do the construction. They work together if it's in the county area, but programmed somewhere else. So probably work together to see if that can be moved up onto the 10-year and get programmed. But clearly a definite need there for sure.
Mayor?
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Steve. I look at the size and weight of those boulders, and I know when that power of that water, it's amazing to me. Nevada first, of course, and that's your responsibility and ours, but having driven back and forth so often to California and looking at the flood across just south of Jean on I-15 and then down by Prim, are we able to do anything with flood control with the Cal, or are they and their Caltrans? I mean, we seem to be the distant cousin that they're not real interested in working with, but we have so many Nevadans that go off somewhere and are caught in that flood channel. It is dangerous, and talk about not sinkholes so much as roadways just washed out, but you're stuck. You're up in that pass looking down. I know our signs are out there, but what are we doing? Anything at all?
Well, from our perspective, that's outside of our jurisdiction essentially. But I know that NDOT's aware of it. I know Caltrans is aware of it. Whether or not they're planning on doing anything, I don't really know. You know, that the highway goes right through a dry lake bed, and so by definition, all the mountains drain to that one location. And so it has flooded in the past, and it'll probably flood in the future. I don't know that there's much that can be done. You know, in terms of stopping the flooding, other than warning people that, you know, that the flooding is occurring. I mean, there probably could be something built to keep the water off of the roadway somehow, but until it just evaporates or seeps into the ground, there's nowhere for that water to go.
Okay, thank you. I didn't think there was, but I know how we've been calling for decades for something to happen there. And aside from the solar camp that exists, but just having watched that and driven it, and I see our state highway patrol out there when it is flooding. I mean, they're trying to help our people back and
Sure,
forth.
yeah.
So it's, to me, that's all part of the area. The regional, do you work with a regional committee? No.
No, I haven't really had much
Okay.
interaction on I-15.
I know it's hard enough in Nevada, so we got to take care of ourselves first. But
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks.
Any other comments or questions? I just want to say thank you to Flood Control for all their work on these recent storms and for the public works agencies, which really stepped up in getting sediment off the roads here in town and obviously up in Mount Charleston. So thank you.
Yeah, it was a huge effort.
Oh. There's public comment at the end of the meeting, so we'll have that opportunity at the end of the meeting. Right, from the board. So our board had their questions. Mayor, do you have another comment?
I'm sorry, yes. Knowing what's just been occurring with the MGM properties and Caesars, and this probably is a really stupid question, but nonetheless, everything obviously is communication, especially in crisis such as those floods, and how you communicate. Is there a backup system, and are you prepared when you cannot, through technology, reach who you need to reach and how?
Yeah. Our system in particular is on a battery backup, and we have generators, and we have a secondary system at the National Weather Service that we paid for. Actually, this board approved the funding for that, so we have a backup for our system. So I think getting the information out from our office will work. In terms of emergency management, I think if there was an issue, for example, the virtual worked really well. It was easier for everyone to get on. You know, it was 150 people on that virtual meeting, and so it was easy to do. And you could just do it on your phone if you're in the car or whatever. So it was very handy. If the internet was down or if there was power outages or whatever in town,
You're still okay.
then there's backup plans. We go old school, and then we start meeting at a building and doing our thing there.
I will say that with regards to Mount Charleston, the one caveat to that was Mount Charleston doesn't have any access, and so it was a concern for the emergency management operations to really have that kind of communication on the mountain. So I know it's not an easy problem to solve, but certainly trying to get communication
Definitely,
up
if you
the
get
mountain.
into more remote areas, it becomes more of a challenge.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Okay, thank you for your comments, Commissioner Jones. Part 2 of your agenda is the consent agenda. These are items 5 through 10. Considered to be routine, may be acted upon in one motion.
Move to approve.
All right, there's a motion to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
Item 11 is comments by the general public.
All right, this is the second time set aside for public comment for the Regional Flood Control District. Anyone wishing to address the board with regards to matters before the Flood Control District, please step forward to the microphone, state your name, and please limit your comments to 3 minutes.
This is concerning what I just heard.
Yeah,
All
go
right,
ahead.
okay.
Just please state your name for the record.
My name is Christ Nimrod, Nimrod, Nimrod. Oh, and thank you, lovely Mayor Carroll, and for your your years of service. I appreciate your duty. Thank you. Oh, and say hello to Oscar for me. And on your board of commissioners also, great work. Now, I was listening to the gentleman, and he was talking about storm drains and channels. I have no idea what those are, but what I'm wondering is, since there's this need for water in Las Vegas, are these channels and storm drains, are they going into Lake Mead? They are? So nothing is being wasted. I mean, there's going to be some waste, yeah, but it's all being directed somewhere to Lake Mead. Now, there's talk about draining Lake Powell into Lake Mead. So is that going to be done? With all this water, I would think that we would need Lake Powell if it was done properly with engineers, my thinking. But, so we're going to drain Lake Powell? Is that a thing? Okay. Well, that's my questions. Thank you. I'm sorry about those deaths.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Nimrod.
Okay.
Anyone else wishing to provide public comment?
I beg your pardon?
Either side.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Cesar Sedano, S-E-D-A-N-O. I reside at 1445 North Hollywood, which is off of Hollywood and Owens in Washington area. We had a lot of flooding. My house went, for the first time, 8 inches underwater inside my house. Lost a lot of property damage, and I saw photos up there of 1999. 1999, I didn't have one drop of water, but I do remember plucking firefighters off of trucks that day. So I've worked for the county for a lot of years. I've made a lot of phone calls to the county commissioners, and things of that nature about the way the east side has been forgotten. We have no sensors up there. We have no retention basin. I was asked to give up land up on Sunrise Mountain for the creation of a retention basin. Never happened. And this was back in 1995, 96. We still don't have the means to control the water up there. There was a redevelopment of the road to create a bike lane. Well, that's great and all, but now every time, not just a 100-year flood, but every time there's water and floods, water pours down into our neighborhood, into my house, into my driveway, into my garage. Normally, it's only about an inch of water, but it's an ongoing problem. It doesn't stop. There's a retention basin next to me, or a wash area with very large culverts. Kids hang out and party all night long. It's tons of graffiti. You can drive a car inside there. It is riddled with sleeping bags, mattresses, and pallets because the homeless are turning it into homes. Nobody comes and cleans this up. Constant calls. So while we're sitting here patting ourselves on the back, what are we doing with the infrastructure that's already in place when we're not maintaining it and we're not making sure that it's adequately able to support the water should it come? Because it's full of stuff that's not supposed to be in there. Tires, mattresses, and things of that nature. So it's really disappointing because I've been a longtime resident of the east side of town in Las Vegas. I was born and raised on the east side of town, Bonanza and Hollywood area. My parents lived there, and I've watched it rapidly deteriorate with all these lack of services up there. And here we are, in a situation where people lost a lot of property, including myself, for the first time ever. And those houses have been around for years. I've been in my same house for over 25 years. Never had an issue until recently when they redesigned all the roads up there. The roads flood. Take a look at the roads up there after a rain. Evaluate it. They're not designed correctly. They're not channeling the water away from the residences. They're actually just leaving it in puddles everywhere. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And if you wanna
Justin,
leave
can I
your
just ask him to
Yeah.
wait 1 second, and I'll meet with you and get your name and address?
Yes, sir.
Anyone else wishing to provide public comment? Cam?
I have a question, Kelly Wright. I'm asking about the Flamingo Wash specifically between University Center.
Could you speak right into that microphone or pull
Oh,
it towards you?
sorry.
Sorry.
Specifically between University Center and Palos Verdes. It's out of control. It's affected our property. It's thousands and thousands of damages to our property because we cannot get anybody in there for months. I was at a Clark County Commissioners meeting the August 1st, I think it was. Nothing's getting done. But last Friday, we had a stolen car. The homeless who have no jobs, no nothing, built a ramp and brought a stolen, beautiful van down there and tried to shove it under the tunnel. So the thing is the immediate thing that we need right now is we need barriers. We need big barriers so they can't roll these. You know, the laundry carts from the casinos? They're bringing those down there. They're bringing the things that they're bringing down there are out of control. We need immediately barriers. I saw the wash on the curve of Mandalay Bay Road. They have these grates in the wash, so they can't go in they have drug dealers down there, and they have traffic on Fridays and Saturday nights going down there. They're living down there and bringing their drugs, and it's affecting our HOA. Our HOA it's being damaged. We can't get the police to come in, even though there's signs all over the place saying that, you know, no trespassing. We can't get any help. They were supposed to be out there for a few weeks ago, but because of the rain and news crews, we can't do this in front of the news crews. You know what, these homeless people, you know, you would normally feel bad for them because they're unhoused, but these ones are offered help. Help in Nevada is there. All kinds of different groups offer them help. They say no. They say no, yet we're the ones that have to pay for it. So they're offered all kinds of help. We're not offered anything. Our insurance has gone from $65,000 to $135,000. We can't use any of our services. We had to close down our pool, our clubhouse, our parks, everything within our walls because of what they're doing there. So I need to know what they're doing with that wash in the long term. I understand that they're going out for bids in a few months, but that's all I know. I don't know details. Are they covering it? Are they putting a grate? Are they doing something so that we could have a little hope that in the future, because years and years of putting up with this, it's gotten so bad. Even during COVID, it wasn't this bad. It's out of control. So how do I find out more information of the plans, specific plans, if they're covering it, if they're going to grade it, I need to know what they're doing, and immediately, as soon as possible, they're going to clean out the wash. Public Works is going to be there on September 18th and 19th. When they're done, we need barriers. We need barriers.
If you want to just hold on 1 minute, and then Mr. Parrish can get with you and right after this. Anyone else wishing to provide public comment? Seeing none, then we'll go ahead and close the public comment period, and this meeting is adjourned. We will start up with RTC in 5 minutes.